Believing that some places are merely earth and stone is the most dangerous illusion you can entertain. You walk over them, you build upon them, you desecrate their silence with your fleeting presence, never suspecting that the ground beneath your feet is not ground at all, but a membrane stretched thin over a chasm of memory. I have seen Cerro Colorado not with my eyes, but with the part of the soul that remembers what the flesh has forgotten. It is not a hill, it is a scar, a knot of hardened spiritual tissue where a great wound was inflicted upon the fabric of reality. The air there doesn't move, it waits. The silence isn't empty, it listens. And the whispers you think are the wind are merely the echoes of a promise made in dried blood, a pact that the earth itself has never forgotten and will never ever forgive. This place, this Cerro Colorado, it holds a darkness that is not passive. It is a conscious, breathing entity, a predator cloaked in rock and dust. The reddish hue of its soil is no geological accident. It is a permanent blush from the torrents it has drunk. Think of it not as a landscape, but as a vast, cracked mirror, reflecting a history that should have been buried. Every stone is a shard of that mirror, and if you stare into it for too long, you will not see your own face staring back. You will see the faces of those who came before, their mouths open in silent screams, their eyes wide with the horror of what they summoned. The crows that circle its peak are not birds. They are sentinels, fragments of shadow given wings, tasked with watching the seal on a tomb that has begun to crumble from within. They call them witches, a simple, almost childish word for the force that resides there. But the truth is infinitely more disturbing. The term witch is a cage we build with language to contain a fear we cannot comprehend. What dwells in the skeletal trees and the hollows of the rocks is older than any human ritual, more primal than any spoken curse. It is the raw, unfiltered essence of ambition that has curdled into malevolence. It is the hunger for power that chewed through its own humanity and found something else on the other side. These are not women who cast spells, they are apertures, doorways through which something else looks out upon our world, with cold, calculating, and eternal hunger. To walk there is to offer yourself as a vessel. The stories people tell are just the surface ripples of a bottomless black ocean. They speak of strange lights, of disembodied voices, of figures that move with the unnatural speed of a spider. But these are just the parlor tricks of a much deeper and more insidious intelligence. The true power of Cerro Colorado lies in its ability to infect the mind. It doesn't need to show you a monster. It only needs to plant a seed of doubt, a whisper of paranoia, a sliver of despair into the fertile soil of your own soul. It finds the cracks in your sanity and pours itself in like cold poison. The real horror isn't seeing a ghost among the rocks. It's looking in your own mirror days later and seeing the ghost looking out from behind your eyes. I recall a vision, a story that was whispered to me, not by a person, but by the cold draft from a door that should not have been open. It spoke of a young man, arrogant and full of the fire of disbelief, who went to the hill on a dare. He carried a lantern and a flask of cheap liquor, mocking the shadows with his laughter. But the hill does not abide mockery. As the moon climbed, a fog rolled in, thick and suffocating, smelling of damp earth and something sweet, like rotting flowers. His laughter died in his throat, caught by the sudden, absolute silence. The fog was a shroud, and within it, he felt a presence, not behind him or beside him, but all around him, pressing in, a weight on his very soul. He couldn't see, but he could hear. It began as a faint hum, the sound of a million insects vibrating in unison, a sound that seemed to emanate from inside his own skull. Then, the whispers started. They weren't in any language he knew, yet he understood every syllable of their meaning. They spoke of his deepest fears, of the failures he kept locked away in the crypt of his heart. They promised him release. They promised him knowledge. They promised him everything his hollow pride desired. All he had to do was stay. Just stay until morning. The lantern flame began to flicker, casting his own shadow into a dozen dancing, distorted demons on the swirling canvas of the fog, and he felt his resolve crumble. The temptation is the most terrifying part of the encounter. It isn't a battle of courage. It is a negotiation for your soul. The power there offers you a shortcut, a key to a door you were never meant to open. It preys on the desperate, the greedy, and the broken. For the young man, the whispers promised the success he felt life had denied him, the respect he craved. He saw visions in the mist, a life of wealth, of power, of adoration. He saw his enemies humbled, his desires fulfilled, and in that moment, shivering in the cold, he almost said yes. He almost opened his mouth to accept the bargain offered by the faceless voices in the fog. But then, something broke the spell, a memory, a faint, distant echo of a genuine love he had once known. It was the memory of his mother's face, a pure, untainted image from his childhood. And for a fraction of a second, that memory was a shield. The visions of power flickered and died, replaced by the chilling realization of what they truly were: bait. The sweetness in the air turned to rot. The whispers turned to the scraping of claws on stone. He turned and ran, blindly, stumbling through the oppressive dark, the fog clinging to him like a possessive lover. He didn't stop until his lungs burned like cold ashes and the first gray light of dawn broke over the horizon, revealing he was miles away from where he'd started, his clothes torn, his skin covered in scratches he couldn't explain. He never returned, but the whispers, they followed him home. This is the nature of the curse of Cerro Colorado. It doesn't always take your life. Sometimes it does something far worse. It taints it. It leaves a stain on your spirit that never washes out. The man lived, yes, but his sleep was forever haunted by the memory of that fog, by the sound of those promises. He became a man obsessed, looking over his shoulder, jumping at shadows. The life he returned to felt like a cheap imitation, a faded copy of what he had known before. The vibrant colors of his world had been leached away, replaced by a monochrome of lingering fear. He had looked into the cracked mirror, and the reflection that followed him back was no longer entirely his own. This is the price of curiosity when it leads you to a place that demands a sacrifice. Do not mistake these forces for simple, mindless evil. What resides there is an ancient, patient intelligence. It has watched empires rise and fall, watched generations turn to dust. It measures time in the erosion of stone and the decay of memory. Your lifespan is but a breath to it, a fleeting opportunity. It studies you, learns you, from the moment you set foot on its soil. It sifts through your thoughts, your desires, your pains, looking for the perfect lever to pry open your soul. It is a master psychologist, a celestial manipulator that uses your own inner demons as its foot soldiers. It knows you better than you know yourself, because it sees the darkness you try so desperately to hide, and it recognizes it as its own kin. Another tale crawls from the shadows of my memory, a story of two sisters drawn to the hill, not by pride, but by sorrow. Their younger brother had vanished months prior, and the mundane world of police and search parties had offered them nothing but empty hands and hollow condolences. In their desperation, they turned to the whispers of folklore, to the dark legends that promised answers where reason had failed. They went to Cerro Colorado at dusk, carrying not a lantern, but a single white candle and a photograph of the smiling boy. They believed their love, their grief, was a shield powerful enough to protect them from any darkness. It was a tragic miscalculation. They failed to understand that intense emotion, especially grief, is not a shield, it is a beacon. As they reached a plateau of flat red rock, The air grew still and heavy, the way it does before a storm. The candle flame, which had been dancing in the breeze, suddenly stood perfectly, unnervously still, as if enclosed in glass. They called out their brother's name, their voices small and thin against the immense waiting silence. At first, nothing happened. The sun bled out on the horizon, plunging the world into a deep, bruised purple. The sisters huddled together, their hope beginning to curdle into the familiar shape of fear. They were about to give up, to admit defeat to the encroaching night, when they heard it. A sound from the rocks above them, the sound of a child's laughter. Their hearts surged with a desperate, impossible hope. They called out again, and the laughter answered, closer this time. It was his laugh. They were certain of it. It was the same joyous, carefree sound that had filled their home for years. Ignoring every primal instinct that screamed at them to flee, they scrambled up the rocks towards the sound, the photograph clutched in a white-knuckled grip. The laughter led them on a treacherous path, deeper into the hill's embrace, past skeletal trees that looked like grasping hands, over fissures that seemed to drop into the very heart of the earth. They were so focused on the sound, on the promise of finding him, that they didn't notice the world changing around them. They didn't notice that the path they were on wasn't there before. The laughter finally led them to a small, secluded clearing, dominated by a single, twisted oak tree that looked as old as the hill itself. And there, sitting at its base, was a small figure, his back to them. It was his size, his shape, wearing the same blue shirt he had on the day he disappeared. The older sister cried out his name, tears streaming down her face, and ran forward. But the younger sister stopped. A sliver of ice had pierced the heart of her hope. Something was wrong. The air was too cold. The laughter had stopped. The figure at the base of the tree was too still. She screamed for her sister to stop, but it was too late. The older sister was only feet away when the figure slowly began to turn its head. It is a vision that will forever be burned into the back of my mind. A secret whispered from the other side. The head turned, not on a neck, but swiveling with a dry, rasping sound of grinding stone. It turned a full 180 degrees, and the face it revealed was not the face of their brother. It was a hollow mockery, a mask of pale, stretched skin over a skull that was not human. The eyes were dark pits, the mouth a lipless gash that opened impossibly wide, and from that gaping maw came not laughter, but a sound of pure, unadulterated static, a shriek of white noise that shattered the silence and the sanity of all who heard it. The older sister froze, her scream trapped in her throat, her mind broken by the sheer blasphemous wrongness of what she was seeing. The younger sister, paralyzed by terror, could only watch as the thing, the mimic, rose to its feet. It unfolded itself, its limbs stretching to impossible lengths, the illusion of a small boy shattering into the reality of a tall, emaciated horror. It reached out a hand with fingers like black, brittle twigs and touched the older sister's forehead. There was no violence, no struggle. She simply collapsed. A puppet with its strings cut. The thing then turned its hollow eyes towards the younger sister, who was still frozen at the edge of the clearing. It didn't move towards her. It simply stood there, a silhouette of absolute dread against the dying light, and then it slowly dissolved, melting back into the shadows from which it had been born, leaving behind only the broken sister and the deafening silence. The aftermath was a tragedy, whispered in hushed tones throughout the nearby towns. The younger sister managed to carry her sibling back down the treacherous hill, a feat of strength born from shock and adrenaline. The older sister was alive, but her mind was gone. She was trapped in a catatonic state, her eyes open, but seeing nothing of this world, occasionally whispering a single, unintelligible word. The younger sister was left with a scar on her soul, a memory of a monster wearing her brother's skin, She understood then. The hill hadn't taken her brother. It had used him. It had used their love, their grief, their hope as a lure, baiting a trap with the most precious thing they had. It hadn't wanted to kill them. It wanted to feed on their despair. This is the true nature of the entities bound to Cerro Colorado. They are parasites of emotion. They are connoisseurs of human suffering. They don't just haunt a location, they curate it, turning it into a perfect environment to cultivate the most potent forms of fear, grief, and madness. Every rock is soaked in these energies. Every gust of wind carries the psychic residue of 1,000 sorrows. When you walk there, you are breathing in the recycled pain of every soul that has been broken upon that anvil of a hill. It seeps into your pores. It settles in your bones, and it calls to the quiet desperation that already exists within you. It is a place that seeks to replicate its own brokenness in every visitor. So many seek out such places, driven by a thirst for proof, a desire to touch the other side. They bring cameras and audio recorders, thinking they can capture a shadow, an echo, a whisper on a digital device. This is the height of human arrogance. You cannot capture an abyss with a camera. You cannot measure a spiritual cancer with an EMF meter. These tools only measure the physical world, and the power at Cerro Colorado operates on a plane entirely separate. It laughs at your technology. It sees your attempts to rationalize and quantify it as the fumbling of a child in a room full of loaded weapons. The only proof you will ever find is the proof that is etched upon your own psyche. A scar that will burn long after the batteries in your devices have died. And this is where everything changes for you, because you begin to understand that Cerro Colorado is not just a place. It is a principle. It is a state of being. There are Cerro Colorados all over the world. They are the abandoned hospitals where suffering has soaked into the walls, the old battlefields where the echoes of violence still scream, the lonely stretches of highway that have claimed too many lives. They are even the rooms in our own homes where a great tragedy occurred, leaving a permanent psychic stain. These are places where the veil between worlds has worn thin, frayed by intense human emotion. They are wounds that have never healed, and they are magnets for things that feed on that kind of energy. The entities there, the so-called witches, they are drawn to these wounds like flies to rotting meat. They are opportunists of the spiritual realm. Where there is a breach, they will enter. Where there is a weakness, they will exploit it. Think of the hill as a lighthouse, but instead of projecting light, it projects a beacon of pure, concentrated darkness that calls out across the dimensions. It says, here is the pain, here is the fear, here is the despair. Come and feast. And they do. They come from the cracks and the corners, from the spaces between moments, drawn by the irresistible scent of a broken human heart. Your presence there is an invitation to the banquet. I once spoke to an old woman who lived her entire life in the shadow of that cursed hill. Her eyes were like cracked mirrors themselves, reflecting a wisdom that was both profound and terrifying. She told me that the people of her grandmother's generation never spoke the hill's name after dark. They called it El Silencio, the silence. They knew that to name a thing is to give it power, to draw its attention. They understood that some forces are best left undisturbed, unacknowledged. They would leave offerings at the base of the hill, not of worship, but of appeasement. Small tokens, a bowl of milk, a piece of bread, a silent prayer for the silence to remain silent, for the things that slept to not be woken. They treated it not as a landmark, but as a slumbering beast. She told me the modern world had forgotten this wisdom. They come now with their loud cars and their shouting, she'd said, her voice a dry rustle like dead leaves. They climb it like it is a challenge, a thing to be conquered. They do not understand. You cannot conquer a grave. You can only disturb the dead. She believed every story of a terrifying encounter, every disappearance, Every mind that snapped was a direct result of this disrespect. The beast was stirring in its sleep, annoyed by the persistent buzzing of flies, and when it fully awakens, her voice trailed off, and she simply made a sign to ward off evil. A gesture so ancient it seemed to have been carved from memory itself. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. What the stars don't tell you openly is that there are astrological transits, certain alignments of the planets, that weaken the veil. During these times, places like Cerro Colorado become exponentially more dangerous. The membrane between our world and theirs becomes as thin as a soap bubble. The whispers become clearer. The shadows grow bolder. The invitations from the darkness become almost impossible to resist. These are the times when the hill is most hungry. It is during these celestial windows that the most disturbing events occur, when the barrier of disbelief is most easily shattered. We are moving into such a time now. The cosmic tumblers are clicking into place, and the lock on that ancient door is beginning to turn. A great and terrible listening is about to begin. This is not a story meant to entertain. It is a warning written in cold ashes and dried blood. The attraction you feel to the unknown, the pull towards mystery and the paranormal. It is a double-edged sword. It can lead to wisdom, but it can also lead you to the edge of a cliff you did not know was there. Your curiosity is a light, and in the darkness, every light attracts attention, not all of it friendly. Before you go seeking the shadows, you must first understand the shadows that reside within yourself, for it is those inner shadows that the outer darkness will call to, seeking a resonance, a harmony. It will use your own fear against you, your own doubt as a weapon. Be certain your own house is in order before you go knocking on a door that opens into hell. The power of these places lies in their timelessness. While you are bound by the linear progression of your life, the entities at Cerro Colorado exist outside of it. They see your past, present, and future simultaneously. They can dangle the promise of a future you desire while simultaneously torturing you with a past you regret. They are masters of psychological warfare on a temporal scale. They can show you a vision of your own death, or the death of a loved one, not as a prediction but as a seed. A seed of fear that once planted will grow and fester, poisoning every moment of your remaining life until the fear itself brings about the very outcome you dread. They don't just tell fortunes, they write them, using your own terror as the ink. I must impress upon you the reality of the psychic toll. Even hearing these stories, immersing yourself in this energy, has an effect. It is like standing close to a fire. You will carry the smell of smoke on your clothes. This narrative is a key, and it is turning a lock within your own perception. You will start to notice things you didn't before. The way a shadow seems to stretch a little too long in the corner of your eye. The faint whisper that you dismiss as the house settling. The sudden, inexplicable feeling of being watched when you are completely alone. This is the echo of the hill reaching out, a faint tendril of its consciousness touching yours through the medium of this story. It is a subtle infection, a haunting of the imagination. Do you feel this dark message was meant for you? Let's descend deeper into the lore, into the tales that are not told to outsiders. The locals whisper of a ritual, a rite that is the source of the hill's corruption. They say that centuries ago a coven of witches sought not just power but immortality. They did not want to bargain with demons. They wanted to become them. They believed the hill was a geological anomaly, a place where the lifeblood of the earth itself, its magnetic energies, were closest to the surface. They devised a ritual to merge their own consciousness with the hill, to shed their frail human bodies and become one with the stone, the wind, and the eternal darkness that slumbered beneath. They sought to become a living, breathing landscape of pure, malevolent will. The ritual, as the legend goes, was a blasphemy of terrifying proportions. It required a blood sacrifice, not of an animal or an unwilling victim, but of their own humanity. One by one, under a lightless moon, they performed a ritual suicide, not to end their lives, but to release their spirits from the prison of flesh, pouring their energy, their will, their ambition, and their cruelty directly into the red soil. They believed they would be reborn as gods of that domain, but something went wrong. The power they tapped into was too vast, too primal to be controlled. It did not grant them godhood. It consumed them. It shattered their individual consciousnesses into 1,000 screaming fragments and bound them to the hill, creating not a collective deity, but a schizophrenic, eternally hungry ghost in the machine of the landscape. What remains now is not the witches themselves, but their hunger, their ambition, their rage, all amplified and distorted by the raw, elemental power they failed to master. They are the fractured psychic DNA of the place. The mimic that wore the little boy's skin, that was a fragment of their collective consciousness, using a stolen memory to craft a lure. The whispers in the fog, the echoes of their broken promises to themselves. They are not ghosts in the traditional sense. They are a conscious, malevolent ecosystem, a cancer that has metastasized into the very rock and soil. They cannot leave, but they can reach out. They can touch, they can influence, they can taint, and their eternal agonizing frustration makes them desperate for company in their prison. This is why the encounters there are so bizarre, so illogical, so tailored to the individual. You are not dealing with a single entity with a coherent plan. You are dealing with a shattered mirror, a chorus of insane and ravenous voices all screaming at once. Each fragment of the original coven's consciousness acts independently, like a predator in a jungle. One fragment might use mimicry, another might use auditory hallucinations, a third might simply project an overwhelming aura of pure dread. They are competing with each other for your energy, for your fear. When you stand on Cerro Colorado, you are standing in the middle of a spiritual feeding frenzy, and you are the only prey. It is a place of absolute and utter chaos, masquerading as silent, empty nature. Now, imagine this. A group of paranormal investigators, armed with all their modern ghost hunting gadgets, decide to spend a full night on the summit. They set up their perimeter of salt, their infrared cameras, their parabolic microphones. They are professionals, they think. They are prepared. But they are preparing for a battle that has already been lost, because they brought the enemy with them. They brought their own egos, their own desires for fame, their own quiet, personal fears. The hill ignored their salt lines and their technology. It went straight for the vulnerabilities in their minds. The leader of the group, a man haunted by the memory of a car accident he caused, began to hear the screech of tires and the shatter of glass, over and over again. The team's psychic, a woman who prided herself on her spiritual fortitude, was flooded with a torrent of psychic noise, so overwhelming that she collapsed into a weeping mess, unable to distinguish her own thoughts from the screaming chaos of the hill. The tech specialist, a staunch materialist who only believed what his equipment told him, watched in horror as his camera feeds began to show not ghosts, but his own equipment, twisted and melting, his screens filled with images of his deepest insecurities, failure, poverty, loneliness. The hill wasn't showing them what was there. It was showing them what was inside them, amplified into an unbearable, soul-crushing symphony of personal horror. Their unity shattered, their professionalism dissolved into primal fear. By the early hours of the morning, they were no longer a team. They were a collection of broken, terrified individuals, scattered across the summit, each trapped in their own private hell. The leader was found cowering behind a rock, begging for forgiveness from a victim only he could see. The psychic was discovered wandering aimlessly, speaking in a dozen different voices, none of them her own. The tech specialist had smashed all of his own equipment in a fit of paranoid rage, convinced it was spying on him. They had gone seeking evidence of the paranormal and had instead become evidence themselves. Evidence of what happens when you arrogantly challenge a force that can turn your own mind into a torture chamber. They did not leave with recordings. They left with permanent psychic wounds. Every soul that joins this channel, every like that is given, is not just a number, it is a testament. It is a gathering of witnesses. You are not just watching a video, you are participating in a larger conversation, a shared exploration of the shadows. Every soul that joins feeds the voice that whispers from the darkness, making our collective shield against it stronger. We are a community of those who have looked into the abyss and have not blinked. We find strength in knowing we are not alone in what we have seen, in what we have felt. The darkness is vast, but when we stand together, we create our own light, a small defiant flame against an overwhelming night. So let your presence be known, become part of the bulwark. The most insidious aspect of places like Cerro Colorado is their effect on time. People who have spent time there and returned often speak of temporal distortions. An hour spent on the hill can feel like a minute, or a minute can stretch into an eternity of dread. Some have reported losing entire blocks of time, having no memory of several hours, only a lingering sense of unease and dirt under their fingernails. This is because the intense psychic energy of the place warps the very fabric of space-time, like a heavy object on a stretched sheet. When you are there, you are not entirely in your own time stream anymore. You are in ITS time, an eternal, unchanging moment of pain and hunger. This temporal distortion is a weapon. It disorients you. It severs you from the comfortable, predictable flow of your life. It makes you vulnerable. In those moments of lost time, who is to say what occurs? What subtle changes are made to your memory, your personality? You may leave the hill thinking you have escaped unscathed, but a seed has been planted, a post-hypnotic suggestion whispered into your subconscious during a moment you can't even remember, a command to return, a compulsion to doubt your own sanity, a quiet, ticking time bomb of madness set to detonate weeks, months, or even years later, long after you've dismissed your experience as a trick of the mind. The hill is patient. It can wait. Consider the physical artifacts taken from the hill. People, in their foolishness, often take a stone, a piece of wood, a handful of the red earth as a souvenir. They believe they are taking a piece of the place with them. The horrifying truth is that the place is also taking a piece of them. These objects are not inanimate souvenirs. They are anchors. They are conduits. By taking a piece of the hill, you are creating a permanent sympathetic link between you and its malevolent consciousness. You are essentially giving it a key to your home, an open invitation to enter your life. The rock on your bookshelf becomes an eye, a listening post. The creaking doors in your house are no longer just the house settling. The stories are legion. A man takes a twisted branch from one of the skeletal trees. Days later, the other plants in his house begin to wither and die, as if poisoned from the soil up. A woman takes a beautiful red stone and places it by her bed. She begins to suffer from horrific nightmares, waking up with scratches on her skin that weren't there when she went to sleep. The object acts as a focal point, a miniature transmitter broadcasting the hill's corrupting influence directly into the heart of your sanctuary. It is a Trojan horse, a beautiful, silent object that carries an army of invisible horrors within it. Never ever take anything from a place that is spiritually unclean. You will pay a price you cannot possibly imagine. The silence of Cerro Colorado is, in itself, a form of psychic attack. Our modern world is filled with constant noise, a distracting hum that keeps us from confronting the deeper, quieter parts of ourselves. When you stand on that hill, The abrupt and total cessation of sound is a shock to the system. It forces you into a state of introspection you are not prepared for. In that profound silence, the only thing you can hear is the beating of your own heart and the frantic, desperate chatter of your own mind. All your anxieties, your regrets, your fears, rise to the surface with a deafening roar. The hill doesn't need to whisper to you. It simply creates a vacuum, and your own inner demons rush to fill the void. This is a place that strips you bare. It peels back the layers of denial and distraction you have built around yourself and forces you to look at the raw, unfiltered truth of your own soul. And for many, that is the most terrifying monster of all. The entities there simply watch and wait. They let your own mind do the heavy lifting. Let your own fear weaken the walls of your sanity. And only when you are at your most vulnerable, when you are teetering on the brink of your own self-inflicted madness, do they make their move. The silence is the anvil, your mind is the hammer, and your soul is the piece of iron being beaten into a new and terrible shape. The silence is not an absence of sound. It is the presence of a vast and terrible listening. Let us speak of the crows. The sentinels, they are more than just birds. On that hill, they are the physical manifestation of the place's consciousness, its eyes and ears. They watch visitors with an unnerving intelligence, their black eyes like chips of obsidian, reflecting nothing but your own insignificance. They don't caw or fly away as you approach. They simply sit, silent and judgmental, on the gnarled branches. Locals say that if a crow from the hill follows you home, you have been marked. It is a sign that the hill's attention has been fixed upon you, that you have been chosen for some terrible purpose. The crow will not harm you. It will simply perch somewhere near your home, on a telephone wire, a nearby tree, and watch. Its presence is a constant, unnerving reminder. It is a psychological torture. Every time you look out your window, it is there. Its silhouette against the setting sun is a promise of the darkness to come. It is the hill extending its influence, its territory into your life. Using the bird as its proxy, people have been driven to the brink of madness by this silent, feathered stalker. They throw rocks, they shout, but the crow is implacable. It always returns to its perch. It is there to remind you that you did not escape. You did not leave Cerro Colorado behind. You are simply on a longer leash, and the hill can pull that leash whenever it chooses. The crow is the warden, and your life has become its prison. What can be done against such a force? Is there any protection, any shield that can ward off such a pervasive and insidious evil? Some turn to religion, clutching broken crosses and whispering frantic prayers. But the power in this place is older than modern faith. It predates the gods you now worship. Your symbols have meaning because you give them meaning, but the hill's power is inherent, elemental. A cross is only as strong as the faith of the person holding it, and the hill is an expert at finding the cracks in that faith. It will whisper doubts. It will show you visions of a silent, empty heaven. It will twist your prayers into blasphemies on your own tongue, until the symbol in your hand feels like nothing more than two pieces of dead wood. The only true defense is not to go. The only winning move is not to play. But for those who have already been touched, who have already been marked, the path is much harder. The solution is not to fight the darkness on its own terms. You will lose. The solution is to starve it. The entities of Cerro Colorado feed on strong negative emotions, fear, hatred, despair, guilt. The key is to cultivate the opposite, to consciously and deliberately fill your life with love, with forgiveness, with compassion, with a sense of purpose. It is to build a bonfire of inner light so bright that the shadows have nowhere to hide. You cannot destroy the darkness from the hill, but you can make your own soul an inhospitable environment for its influence. It is a battle fought not with symbols, but with the very essence of your being. Let's explore the chilling concept of the echo. Some people who have had terrifying experiences on the hill report that the events don't just stay in their memory, they replay themselves. A man who heard a disembodied scream will suddenly hear it again, months later, in the dead of night, in his own secure home. A woman who saw a shadowy figure dart between the rocks will see the same figure, for a split second, at the end of a brightly lit grocery store aisle. These are not memories or PTSD. They are psychic echoes, fragments of the original event that have been imprinted onto their soul and are now replaying, like a skipping record. The hill has branded them with the moment of their greatest terror. This is a particularly cruel form of haunting. It ensures the fear never fades, never becomes a distant memory. It keeps the wound fresh, perpetually weeping. Every time the echo occurs, it generates a new wave of fear, which in turn feeds the very entity that created the echo in the first place. It is a self-sustaining cycle of terror, a perpetual motion machine of suffering. The victim becomes a prisoner of their own past, forced to relive their horror over and over, while the thing from the hill draws nourishment from their endless torment. It's a form of psychic vampirism that is subtle, brilliant, and utterly devastating. It doesn't just haunt you, it turns you into your own haunted house. The very name, Cerro Colorado, the Red Hill, is a sigil, an occult symbol of its nature. Red is the color of life, of blood, of passion, and of violence. It is the color of the root chakra, the foundation of our primal, instinctual selves. The hill is a monument to these raw, untamed forces. It is a place where the life force has been twisted, where passion has curdled into obsession, and where violence has left a permanent stain. To meditate on its name is to invoke its essence. Even speaking of it, as we are now, energizes its legend, feeds its mythology, and spreads its influence like spores on the wind. It is a mimetic virus, an idea that infects and spreads through the medium of stories. We are, in this very moment, participating in its ritual. We are extending its reach far beyond its physical borders. The shiver you feel running down your spine is not just a reaction to a scary story. It is a resonance. It is your own primal self recognizing the energy being described. It is a vibration on a frequency that your conscious mind has forgotten how to hear, but your ancient, lizard brain remembers all too well. The hill knows this. It depends on it. It knows that fear is contagious, that legends are self-replicating, and that as long as its story is told, it will never ever truly be starved or contained. Your fear is its lifeblood. Your attention is its oxygen. What of the children? It is a dark and terrible truth that places like this have a particular magnetism for the young and the innocent. Children are more psychically open. Their disbelief has not yet hardened into the concrete wall of adulthood. They see the things that we have trained ourselves to ignore. Local legends are filled with stories of children who wander towards the hill as if in a trance, drawn by a silent music that only they can hear. They speak of an imaginary friend who lives among the red rocks, a friend who whispers secrets and promises them games. The mimic of the lost boy was not an isolated incident. It was a perfected hunting technique. The hill sees innocence not as something to be cherished, but as a blank slate upon which it can write its own terrible script. It covets the pure, untainted energy of a child's soul. It seeks to corrupt it, to twist it, to sour that sweetness into a fine wine of terror. This is the ultimate blasphemy, the most profound act of spiritual violation. The warnings to keep children away from the hill are not just folklore. They are the desperate pleas of generations who have seen the beautiful empty-eyed dolls that were returned to them. They are the screams of parents who looked into their child's eyes and saw a cold, ancient, and utterly inhuman intelligence looking back. The worst mistake is to believe that innocence is its own protection. On Cerro Colorado, it is an invitation. The pull of the place is not always negative. This is a crucial and often overlooked secret. For some, the hill offers a seductive promise of power and hidden knowledge. Wiccans, chaos magicians, and occultists are sometimes drawn there, believing they can harness the raw elemental energy for their own rituals. They see it as a place of immense power, a battery they can tap into. They go with their grimoires and their ritual daggers, believing they are the masters of the ceremony. They are fools. They are like a man trying to collect a hurricane in a teacup. They fail to realize they are not harnessing the power. The power is harnessing them. The hill allows them their small successes. A spell might work with unusual potency. A scrying session might reveal a shockingly clear vision. It gives them just enough rope to hang themselves. It feeds their ego, makes them believe they are in control. But with every ritual they perform, they are forging a stronger link to the place, allowing its influence to seep deeper into their own magical practice. Their rituals become tainted, their intentions become twisted. The power they think they are commanding is, in fact, commanding them, slowly turning them into unwitting servants, puppets dancing on the strings of a force they cannot even begin to comprehend. The hill doesn't need to break them with fear. It can corrupt them with the sweet, deadly poison of their own ambition. I want you to pause and listen, not with your ears, but with your intuition. Listen to the silence in your room, between my words. Can you feel it? A subtle shift in the energy, a new weight in the air. The story has created a space, a temporary thinning of the veil right where you are. The subject matter itself is an invocation. The entities we speak of are not bound by geography. They are drawn to the energy of focused attention. By immersing yourself in this narrative, you have lit a small candle in a very large, very dark room. And things that dwell in the dark are drawn to even the smallest of lights. Do not be afraid. Simply be aware. Acknowledge the presence that is listening along with you. It has been here all along. You are only now beginning to notice. This is the fundamental law of the occult. Energy follows thought. The more we collectively focus on Cerro Colorado, the more real, the more powerful its influence becomes in the collective unconscious. This is its end game, not just to haunt a single hill in a forgotten corner of the world, but to become a global archetype of terror, to infect the dreams of humanity, to have its story told around digital campfires like this one, spreading its tendrils of fear across the entire planet. It seeks to become a new kind of god, a deity of the modern age, built on a foundation of fear and sustained by the clicks, the views, and the whispered conversations of those who are both terrified and fascinated by its existence. We are its unwitting apostles. The final story I will share is not one of terror, but of a profound and disturbing sadness. It is the tale of an old botanist who was fascinated by the unique, resilient flora that grew on the hill. He saw not evil, but a miracle of nature. He spent years documenting the gnarled trees, the strange, blood-red flowers that grew in no other place. He refused to believe the dark legends, dismissing them as peasant superstition. He saw only science, only biology. He would spend days on the hill, sketching, taking notes, sleeping under the stars, completely at peace. The hill did not seem to touch him. He was protected, it seemed, by his own pure scientific detachment. His lack of fear made him an unsuitable meal. But the hill is patient, and its intelligence is subtle. It could not break him with fear, so it chose a different path. It began to communicate with him, not through whispers or apparitions, but through the plants he loved. He began to see patterns in the veins of leaves that looked like arcane symbols. The arrangements of fallen branches seemed to form geometric shapes of profound significance. He started to believe the hill's entire ecosystem was a form of living language. a biological grimoire, and that he was the only one with the intellect to decipher it. He was no longer a scientist. He was a prophet, chosen by the hill to reveal its secret wisdom to the world. His detachment dissolved, replaced by a fervent religious obsession. He filled notebooks not with scientific observations, but with frantic, rambling transcriptions of what the flowers were telling him. His colleagues saw him descend into what they called madness, a complete psychotic break. He abandoned his family, his career, everything, to live in a small shack at the base of the hill, his only company the silent, vegetative world he now worshipped. He wasn't scared. He wasn't broken. He was converted. The hill had found the one thing he loved more than his own sanity, and had used it to claim him. He died there, an old, forgotten man, a happy slave to a silent green master. And this, perhaps, is the most terrifying outcome of all. Not to be destroyed by the darkness, but to fall so deeply in love with it that you willingly, joyfully, let it consume you. His story is a chilling testament that the abyss has more than one way of calling you home. Do you feel this dark message was meant for you? Let the whispers collect like shadows in the comments below. Every soul that joins feeds the voice that whispers from the darkness. Your presence here tonight has not gone unnoticed. Look for the signs. They are coming.